It's your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. Fantastic show coming up today. Vikings heavy, as it turns out. Tuesdays usually are. Andrew Krammer joins me here in a little bit to review the film of Sunday's wild overtime win over the Bears. A lot of positives, some resilience, plenty of negatives in the final 2 minutes of regulation. All of it adds up to an overtime win, though, that gets the Vikings to 9-2. I will share my hot takeaways with Andrew, as well as get into some of the breakdowns on offense and defense. My good friend Keith Rashat joins me after that for Vikings poetry. 3 of them this week, as the only proper way to characterize that game. We'll take a trip down memory lane, too. A similarly wild Vikings game that we were both at a quarter century ago. Some wild results at the end of the show, some Gophers results at the end of the show. Look ahead quickly to a big Wolves game tonight, or at least an important Wolves game tonight. First, though, what did I miss? Daniel Jones, Giants quarterback who made his money off of the 2022 season, and part of that being a playoff win over the Vikings and Ed Donatel, defensive coordinator. Giants won that game 31-24. You might remember that game mostly for Kirk Cousins throwing short of the sticks on 4th down on the game-ending play, basically, that sealed the Vikings' fate. That play, still in my mind, by the way, was the beginning of the end for Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. I get that maybe other things would have taken them down this path, but I felt like that play right there, Kevin O'Connell knew he couldn't coach certain things out of Kirk Cousins, even if Kirk Cousins is a good NFL quarterback. So anyway, that game, though, Daniel Jones showed up big. He made plays with his legs, made plays with his arms, got paid a 4-year, $160 million extension, $90-some million guaranteed. Turned out to be a nightmare for the Giants. They let go of Saquon Barkley. He goes to Philadelphia, partly because they had already paid Daniel Jones. They're not going to pay a running back. Barkley's having a tremendous season for the Eagles. Daniel Jones gets hurt in 23 after a terrible start to the season, comes back this year, no better this year, gets released earlier this week, like 4 or 5 days ago. He gets cut by the Giants. He was playing fourth team quarterback by the time they demoted him. He was playing safety on their scout team squad, giving him some looks at safety. That's how far he had fallen. But he is a free agent right now. What does that have to do with the Vikings? Well, they are one of the teams prominently linked to potentially signing Daniel Jones for the rest of the season. Now, obviously, this would not be to be the starter. Sam Darnold's having a very good year. He's had 2 very good bounce-back games after that Jacksonville game. Ranks in the top half of the league in a lot of important stats. Ranks in the top 10 in some very important stats. This is not a Sam Darnold replacement. This is Sam Darnold insurance for this season and potentially a look to 2025. But before I get into what that means, Kevin O'Connell was asked about this on Monday because there's been speculation, because there's been reports that the Vikings are linked to him along with Baltimore. You hear San Francisco, which I think is a possibility. But those are the teams that are prominently featured in kind of the discussion around Daniel Jones. Here's what Kevin O'Connell had to say about that speculation.
Yeah, I'm not going to really get into that today, but I will say tons of respect for Daniel Jones as a player and a person. Got to know him through the draft process years ago, and I'm sure now that he's a free agent and there's probably a ton of league-wide interest in him, Daniel's going to make the decision that's best for him and his career moving forward, and I'm sure he's working through that process right now. But I really can't get into too much about any short-term or long-term. I can just say I've been a fan of Daniel's for a long time, and hope wherever his next stop takes him, it's a good opportunity for him.
So that's a very diplomatic and political answer to that question. It is definitely not those reports are erroneous. We love Daniel Jones, but we don't have interest in signing him. That was a non-denial denial that makes me think the interest is real. Doesn't mean he's for sure coming here, but it does sound like the interest is real. Now, why, if you're wondering, why would the Vikings have interest in Daniel Jones? Here's what I think. 3 things. 1, it is Sam Darnold insurance. He's been banged up a little bit this year. Remember the game earlier this year where he hurt his knee, but he came back in the game. Turned out he was okay. Testing was all right. So he's had this foot thing that he's had to come out of the game a couple times. So you get this issue where Darnold has played well this season. He's been a warrior. He's been rugged, but you're 9-2. And if he goes down, you want more quarterback options. And here's a guy who's out there on the market that could help you, an upgrade where you don't usually have an upgrade potential at this time of the season. So that's number 1. It's Sam Darnold insurance. Number 2, it's potentially a look at Daniel Jones for the future. If you brought him in right now on, probably a minimum salary because he's still getting paid big bucks from the Giants on that contract in 2024, if you bring him in now and get him a look for 2025 and you say, hey, I like what we got here, he could be in the mix here for 2025. Remember, Sam Darnold is a free agent. Nick Mullins is a free agent. Jaron Hall is gone. Brent Rippon is a free agent. So the only quarterback under contract next season for the Vikings is J.J. McCarthy, who will be in his second season, who will be coming off a knee injury. Don't know how he'll be faring health-wise. Don't know if he'll be ready to assume the role of starting quarterback right away. So you've got some insurance there. If you get him in now, get a look at him, and you say, hey, actually he fits the system pretty well, things like that. That brings me to the third point. I think Daniel Jones would fit pretty well here. Kevin O'Connell getting himself a well-earned reputation for working well with quarterbacks along with the rest of the guys in that room. Could be a good fit in terms of, hey, get him in here. Maybe they can do things with him that the Giants weren't doing, see things there that they weren't doing in New York, maybe find out that it's a good match, could be kind of Sam Darnold 2.0 in 2025. Again, that's not the ideal plan. The ideal plan is J.J. McCarthy is ready to go both physically and mentally, and he takes the reins in Game 1 in 2025, and he goes from there. But you don't know with these young quarterbacks. You never know, especially a guy who's not getting the reps. He's getting the mental reps. They're doing all the VR stuff, virtual reality, trying to get him some virtual reps, things like that. But you don't know for sure until he gets in there. So interesting, the teams that are looking, he wants to go to a playoff contender. That's why Baltimore's in the mix, even though obviously he's not supplanting Lamar Jackson. That is, again, Lamar Jackson insurance. Jackson has been injured at various points in his career. That's insurance if he would get hurt, things like that. San Francisco, a little different. Brock Purdy's been banged up. They're right on the fringe of the playoff race. They could use a plug-and-play guy that maybe could get them back in the race. So he'll probably have more instant playing time in San Francisco, whereas Baltimore and Minnesota might be more good teaching environments, good learning environments for the rest of his season as he tries to pivot to 2025. But it's interesting. Daniel Jones is actually a week older than Sam Darnold. He was one draft class ahead of him, 6th overall pick in 2019. Darnold, of course, was drafted in 2018, very high pick, number 3 overall. But you look at both of them, kind of similar stories. Jones just doesn't get it done in New York. Has one really good season where they think he's on the upswing, doesn't get it done. But then now you have a possibility of him maybe coming here. We will see how that goes the rest of the way, but it is an interesting development if it does indeed happen. It's Vikings film review time. Michael Rand here with Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune, fresh off your trip to Chicago. Andrew just got back into town a couple hours ago. You were witness to it all, 60 minutes and then some in Chicago. An overtime win, a wild game, and I don't quite know how to describe it other than the Vikings got a win. It almost felt like they won twice and lost once in that game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It felt like more game than one. In a very Soldier Field game. Oh, just a very Chicago game where just the weird things happened nonstop, and especially at the end, the special teams stuff, Caleb Williams running around, the officials playing such a big role in the game with what they called and what they didn't call. At times. So I thought, the one tidbit from, I think it was Mike Pereira on the Fox broadcast where he talks about how in that Addison 69-yard touchdown, they just can't review it because not every team on a coach's challenge, they can't review it because not every stadium has that camera angle. I mean, just incredible stuff.
Right.
all around.
All right, my hot takeaways first before we get to the film. Number one, as resilient as this team has been, and certainly they showed that in overtime by coming back to win, I wonder and I worry that if they would have lost that game, that would have been pretty demoralizing and could have started not a tumble out of the playoffs because they're pretty far up on everybody, but it would have started a pretty significant slide, I think, if they would have lost that game. So that would have been a hard one to come back from.
Yeah, that is hard to tell. I think we could have said a similar thing about, I mean, they beat the Jaguars, but that was one of their worst games of the year, and no one felt like that was a win. The resiliency you talk about, I think you posted this on social media, I think during the game too, about how, this will be the true test of their so-called resiliency in overtime. And they showed you. Sam Darnold goes 6 for 6, 90 yards. They overcome even just the micro, adversity of them overcoming the 2nd and 17 on that drive. The false start by Johnny Munt later in that drive. Just the little things they had to overcome. And that's Darnold, and that's kind of Darnold through his career. And that's this Vikings team, I think. And Kevin O'Connell, it's a credit to him and the locker room and the kind of makeup of guys they brought in. But as far as you saying that would have kind of sent them down, I think they've shown too much in the first 10 or 11 games. I wouldn't agree totally with that, because I think they've shown enough in the first 10 or 11 or so games to be like, this team's got some bounce back to them, even after a loss. They lose 2 games in 5 days. Talking to Harrison Phillips after the game, he brought that up and said, look, in those moments, like on Sunday against the Bears when it gets tough, we think back to obviously the tough moments we've already had and bounce back from, and losing 2 games in 5 days and then ripping off now 3 straight wins or 4 straight wins. Then. That's impressive. So if it would have been 3 and a tough loss at Chicago, this team still would have been, I think, who we thought they were, but they showed now even more so that, hey, they're pretty resilient.
I think that's fair. I think they definitely showed that. I just think if they would have lost this game and then, these last 6, 4 of them are at home, but this is a much tougher stretch of schedule than they've faced lately. I mean, if we go back to obviously the games against the Lions and the Rams were tough games, especially just the way the schedule broke. But, since then it's been Indy, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago. Those are, 4 bad teams, even if the Bears probably are getting better now. I just think it would have been combine that with the loss there, plus then you got to play the Cardinals, who again they didn't play great this past week, but they're 6-5. Then you got to play the Falcons. Then you get the Bears again, but then you got Seattle, Green Bay, Detroit. Like, your schedule the next 6 is tough. So banking that win, I guess, was important. And I don't want to think about what might have happened if they would have lost that game.
Yeah, that is a good point about the upcoming schedule. Now this seems to be the meat of kind of where we're going to compare them to teams that are in that NFC playoff picture. This AFC South tour, not so much. The Bears, not so much, although they're showing some nice things. Yeah, you're right. I do think I see what you're saying as far as this upcoming schedule would have been tough to then be like, all right, now let's play our best against some of our best opponents.
Number 2, this isn't that hot, but just thinking about this, how much we got to worry about the offensive line again now, right? Because they got the reinforcement with Cam Robinson, but he goes down with the injury. I thought Quessenberry held up reasonably well in this game. They had answers, and Darnold, of course, held in the pocket. But if, again, like you said, if you're down to your 3rd string left tackle, or if you're having to move guys around, if they decide that's what they want to do, that is a fraught proposition that we should not overlook.
I agree with you there and I think that's been the case since they lost Christian Darrisaw. Even with Cam Robinson, he is a better pass blocker, a more consistent, reliable pass blocker, somebody who's not going to get Quessenberry can just get kind of thrown into the backfield, not have the power to anchor against some of these better edge rushers. Robinson has that. He's a physical monster, but he's often injured, as he was in Jacksonville. We're seeing that now with this foot injury he's plagued by, and he's also not a great run blocker. And we saw that again he only played, I think, 9 or so snaps on Sunday, but he was very inconsistent when he got out of there. And then they did much of their production with David Quessenberry in there for the rest of the game. So I think the guys that remain in the middle, the Garrett Bradburys, Blake Brandells, now Dalton Reisner, that's still not always getting the job done. Some of those 2-yard runs, 1-yard runs was Garrett Bradbury getting worked back like we've seen ad nauseum over the years. So I do think that is an issue, and it kind of stands out more when you don't have Josh Oliver and you don't have these additional pieces that they use to kind of make their blocking schemes work. Kevin O'Connell, credit to this coaching staff, whether it was him, Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator, or Brian Angelico, the tight ends coach, they used Trent Sherfield as a tight end in this game. They brought him in and said, we're going to use him to chip edge rushers. He's actually going to block Montez Sweat on a 13-yard run by Aaron Jones. They brought him and used one of their bigger wide receivers as really a different role from what he's used to. And that's just good coaching. So they found ways around it. But when you face, as they did at times with the AFC South, some of these big defensive lines, and you're going to see again Kenny Clark coming up here, you're going to see the Lions interior tandem that's really good. Those will continue to wreck you and be a problem. And it's going to test Sam Darnold's internal clock. It's going to make him have to be more perfect and more consistent and overcome some of his teammates, which is not what you want. You want for a journeyman quarterback who you're bringing along to kind of feel comfortable all the time. And some things are burning down around Sam Darnold, and credit to him for not withering yet.
Do you think they stay with Quesenberry, or do you think now that they've kind of made the switch to Dalton Risner that they would consider Brandell at tackle and Ingram back at guard? What's their best alignment?
Well, if Robinson's available, it's going to be him.
Of course, yes. Of course. If he's healthy, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If he's not, I do think they give Quesenberry like a spot start. If this is not like a 4-week Robinson's got to go on IR, then we'll see kind of thing. If this is a week-to-week thing, I could absolutely see them going with Quesenberry for a game or two. They've done that before. And they are really reticent to moving Blake Brandell, which they did discuss before trading for Cam Robinson. That was absolutely in consideration. But they're reticent to do that because of the amount of changes they've already made on the line. One good thing that helps them is Garrett Bradbury is one of the best communicators they've had there. He's somebody that does settle things down mentally. But physically, this line is just, you've got enough issues with them right now. So I think they're hesitant to do that. I wouldn't see that happening. I do think it would be Quesenberry this next week against the Cardinals if they need that.
Final thing, Jefferson caught only 2 passes. Would have had a longer third if not for the Brandon Powell penalty, but we saw finally them take advantage of all the attention paid to Jefferson. Addison goes for 162, Hawkinson goes over 100 yards. Like, you're seeing the full kind of scope of, hey, if you're going to double or even triple Justin Jefferson, other guys are going to be open. They made him pay, but I do think it's got to tip a little bit back the other way. Like, you can't have Justin Jefferson just catching 2 passes. So what I'm saying is, they can't live exclusively like this. So what's the balance? How do they get everybody happy and fed when the offense is clicking?
Yeah, I do think there were missed opportunities for Justin in this game, but this was also a unique game where the Bears are already very good in coverage. Like, I think the Bears 4-7 record or whatever it is, this gets lost. Yeah. Matt Eberflus is a good coach. They do play good defense. And when you watch them in the secondary, the wide angles, you can see how sticky they are in coverage. You can see how disciplined they are, and you can see how a lot of the downfield shots were taken away. That 45-yarder to Jordan Addison to open, I think it was in the first half, from Darnold, it took such a perfect and timely read from Sam Darnold to hit that, because those 3 safeties, they're playing like 3 deep safeties. They're so in unison and conjunction that he had to throw it immediately when the middle guy turned his hips to the far sideline, knowing he wasn't turning toward Addison, he was turning toward Hawkinson, who was coming underneath. That's the kind of stuff where when you're not having coverage busts and guys aren't running wide open, it takes such perfect execution. And with Jefferson, it took even more perfect execution because they were even stickier on him. There was a play in the end zone, the opening goal to go sequence, where they just flat out tackled Justin Jefferson. They doubled him, clamped him up, and then just tackled him. There was no flag, no nothing. And Darnold did miss a wide open Addison underneath Jefferson. So they could have further taken advantage of the attention that Jefferson got. Instead, it was a check down to Munt that led into the Aaron Jones fumble at the 1-yard line. So they didn't get any points on that drive. But with Jefferson, he got so much attention. It was so physical, and he got 2 defensive pass interference calls that probably should have been more, including when you get tackled downfield. I think they played such a physical brand and a very good brand of coverage, and it seemed to be the Bears' kind of MO to go in there and be like, you know what, we're going to do the Legion of Boom thing where we're going to dare you to flag us every single play. And we're going to bet that you don't. And these officials missed not just that, they missed a lot in this game. So there was a good gamble by the Bears that paid off. You're right. You do want to see more passes toward Jefferson, even in some more 50-50 opportunities for him. I do think, though, you've seen a pendulum swing the other way. When Darnold goes through the tough stretch he went through, where it was 5 or 6 turnovers in 2 games or something like that, you saw coaches talk about, hey, let's not have to always force it to Justin. O'Connell even brought up the big 69-yard catch and run by Addison. He said that was a same or similar play to what we ran against the Colts that Darnold forced into an interception to Jefferson. Instead, this time he waited for Addison to get open, and it really was such a tight window. Speaking of the Bears' coverage.
It was,
such a great throw from Darnold. And O'Connell mentioned that, too, of like one of the prettiest throws he's seen. So I think he navigated it well for this game. You don't throw for 330 yards, win a game in overtime without navigating it well. And then I didn't even talk about overtime. The Bears were all over Jefferson in overtime, which is why Hawkinson was so wide open over the middle on some of those big catches. So I think he navigated it well. I think when a defense is going to do this, there is that delicate balance, but when you're striking with these other guys so much, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, but he could have done better here or there, because it was still 330 yards against a really good pass defense, and 2 other guys went over 100 yards. I mean, that's if you're O'Connell and you're saying, look, Jefferson got 27 yards, but at least these other guys got all this stuff. You will take that. You'll take that every single day because it puts you in position to win. And this offense, not this defense, played winning football on Sunday.
I agree with that. And, it maybe gives defenses something else to think about too. It's like, okay, now they're making us pay for this. And you're right. I mean, when he was going through that tough stretch, wasn't Jefferson targeted on all 3 of his interceptions against the Jaguars? So, if you gotta be able to go other places. I'm just saying, like, in future games, you're probably not going to put up 30 points and 450 yards if Justin Jefferson is getting 27 of them. So keeping everybody happy was always, I think, going to be the challenge, because there's only so many footballs to go around. Aaron Jones goes over 100 yards. Addison gets 162. Speedy gets a touchdown. Hawkinson goes over 100s. Like, the only one who probably looks at his stat sheet and is like, that wasn't satisfactory was probably Jefferson, because you talked to him after the game, right? He's always going to be happy if they win, but he also wants his numbers.
Yeah, he was not happy. And I just looking at him, he wasn't happy. That's not something he told me. It's just based on my judgment. I was doing something on Addison and Hawkinson's big day, and obviously Jefferson was going to be a part of it, but he wasn't brought up to the media. So I just walked over and saw him sitting in his locker by himself, asked if he was talking this evening, and then we just got into it. And he was so sullen that my first question became, well, how are you feeling about how the game went for you? It doesn't seem like you're happy about it. And yeah, he admitted being frustrated. He said, I want to always make an impact on the game. I want to provide a spark for my team. But we got the win, and that's all that matters. So he said all the right things, but I didn't realize why he was so upset, because when you're watching the game live, you're watching so many different things. But when you are trying to zone in on Jefferson and you get the wide-angled view, the Bears were just mauling him. So I'm sure he was just so frustrated about how he was getting covered. There were a couple opportunities where Darnold could have, he was open, like just some times where the Bears kind of let him go on the backside of a play, and Darnold didn't make it all the way back there to find him in the play and his progression. So there were some times he could have got the ball, but my guess is his frustration was largely just getting beaten up throughout the game and not having officials respect the fact that, hey, these guys are mauling me quite a bit. So yeah, he wasn't happy. I don't think it was... His MO is not usually, if I have a bad game and we win, I'm going to be mad. It's more so if he's just getting assaulted throughout parts of the game, he generally doesn't take well to that.
Should we, moving on to some film here, a couple things before we go, should we be concerned at all about pass defense at this point? I know yards-wise, they're kind of like, I think they're bottom 5 of the league right now in terms of how many yards they give up. And some of that's a function of they've been playing with leads a lot, so other teams are going to have to throw the ball a lot. That's just, it's not so much that the pass defense has been porous, it's just the teams have to throw to try to catch up. But as well as Gilmore, Murphy, and Shaq Griffin have held up physically in terms of staying on the field, staying healthy, they don't quite seem as sticky as maybe they were early in the year. Murphy's had some good games lately, but like Gilmore, Griffin, what's the concern level with the passing yards that teams are putting up on them, and how much is it tied to pass rush, linebacker play, other stuff too?
Yeah, this is still it's a predominantly zone coverage defense, and that's what the NFL has largely become, that because there's so many Justin Jefferson types out there. There's so many dynamic playmakers. Teams have said we're not going to try and trust guys to cover man-to-man very often, so those rates league-wide have gone down. But you still need to be hyper athletic in zone. You still need to be able to break at the split second. And even though Stephon Gilmore still has the mind of a future Hall of Famer, his body is not at its peak physical shape at this point. So you can see him being late to break on balls. You can see way back in the Lions game, him falling over when Khalif Raymond shakes him at the line for a touchdown. Harrison Smith, same way. Harrison Smith, the mileage on him, he has played every snap in 8 straight games. It's 500 plus snaps over the last 8 weeks. I think he is the only defender to do that on this Vikings team.
Did he practice at all last week? I don't think he did he?
No, he did. He and Gilmore get Fridays off as kind of like veteran rest days. So they were on the injury report, but not for any known injuries.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, Mike, this is an older defense. Shaq Griffin has kind of been like benched quietly. No one's really talking about it, but over the last, really since the bye week, his role has gone down, and then he got beat. Boy, who was it by? Maybe it was one of the Keenan Allen catches in that game early, and we didn't see much of him the rest of the game, if I recall. So Griffin's kind of been phased out. He had a really bad game against the Rams. That would have been after the bye week. So when he was already having his role lessened, he just hadn't played well. So that one has not really gone super well. Gilmore has played well. Harrison's played well. But what you're seeing is teams are saying, and we've talked about this before, we can attack them downhill. If we just get the ball on the perimeter, if we run it on the perimeter, if we throw screens, there was the DJ Moore touchdown was a matchup perfection for the Bears, where I think they found out, how they were rotating Harrison and Gilmore onto Kmet and DJ Moore, and they got both those guys on the same side of the field and ran at them with that screen. And there was nothing Gilmore was going to do. There was nothing Harrison was going to do, because these guys are old. They're not throwing their shoulders at knees. They're not diving into people anymore. Like, this is not the game that they play right now. The guys who do are guys like Cam Bynum, Byron Murphy, Blake Cashman, Van Ginkel. The guys those are the guys, Metellus, who make up for that perimeter defense aggressively. But teams are finding out ways to go away from them and go at the old guys and target them. And then, as we've talked about too, mobility hurts all defense. It doesn't matter how good you are, you can't cover forever. If Caleb Williams is going to do some of the freaky stuff that he did, where he's fourth down, leaping over a guy and running for a first down, or he's buying time, Van Ginkel gets unblocked off one edge and he spins out of it, finds DeAndre Swift 40 yards down the sideline. Like, I'm not blaming a secondary guy on that.
Right.
Like, you're thinking, we got a blitz called. This guy's not going to have 3 or 4 seconds. I only got to worry about these short routes. And also, DeAndre Swift's 40 yards downfield. So I think that's the kind of stuff that Caleb Williams can do to you if you let him break contain. And then you got now Kyler Murray on deck who can do the same thing. So I do think that is a concern as far as trying to make sure you keep these guys in the pocket, because these mobile quarterbacks will burn you no matter how good or disciplined you are in coverage. And this Vikings defense is structured to be a pressure defense where they keep you in the pocket and collapse it and make sure that the coverage disguises on the back end make you hesitate long enough to make you hold the ball so that they can get to you. This is not a defense where it's, we're all pros at man-to-man and just we're going to play straight up and try to beat us. This is a smoke and mirrors kind of defense that has talent on it, but is largely scheme. And you're seeing some teams that can just kind of, like Caleb Williams, run around and just buy some time.
Who's been playing instead of Griffin then? Is it the 3 safety look, or what are they doing?
It's been Metellus, Bynum, and then, as we mentioned, Harrison has not left the field in 2 months. So it's been largely those guys. They've brought in a mixture of Cashman, Camus, Grugier, Hill, obviously Ivan Pace when he's healthy in the middle there. So and Van Ginkel has actually stood up and played interior linebacker too. So they've mixed a lot of guys into the middle, including Byron Murphy, but that Byron's been playing less of that because Shaq hasn't been on the field as much.
Okay. Last thing, offensively, they get a 100-yard rusher with Aaron Jones, so they're obviously moving things around. I mean, he had a 40-yarder on that first drive, which accounted for a good chunk of his yards. But, by and large, the running game was fairly effective. And then Darnold, I think O'Connell had a quote after the game, basically like, I don't know who had a better game in the entire NFL. Maybe Caleb Williams, maybe the guy on the other sideline, but basically saying like Darnold was about as good as he could have been in that game. He makes a lot of big time throws. That's just the thing you got to keep coming back to. He makes a lot of like really accurate, like good read, like 20 or 25 yards in the air down the field. I just don't think I'm quite used to that. It's just not the way Kirk Cousins used to play quarterback. It's just very different to me. But it's been an interesting thing to watch, and he did it to a high level again on Sunday.
Yeah, the old coaching adage of you'd rather say "whoa" than "go." With Kirk, they had to tell him go. Like, come on, like throw it, throw that thing downfield. And with Sam, it's been much more of whoa, don't force it to Jefferson all the time. I do think it's a good fit. Darnold played excellent. He's now played back-to-back games excellent. And it's a good fit for how O'Connell wants to be aggressive downfield and for how talented this offense is. The talent on this offense warrants it to be aggressive. You should try to hit for these big plays. And it's also just a smart coaching thing to do when you've got a quarterback who you don't want a ton of quarterbacks to go 10, 12, 14 plays and try to be consistent and reliable all the time. But Sam, at this stage of his career, is certainly not that guy either.
No.
He's had some of those stretches recently, but week to week, month to month, he's not been that guy. So you need to be explosive. You need to produce big plays. And then as we know in the red zone, they've been so bad at running the football. They finally got a rushing touchdown, but they've been so bad at running the football that you've really had to lean on Sam there too and gotten a lot of field goals because of it. So I think the running game was a great sign. So was Sam's consistency. But the important thing you want to keep going is the explosive plays and that running game, because they kind of toyed with the Bears, where the Bears came out, played too deep, played way off. All of a sudden, boom, Aaron Jones goes for 13. Boom, Aaron Jones goes for 40. Next few drives, they really started to creep that safety up. And it led to some run stops, but then it also led to some big plays. It helped them get that 69-yarder off or the 45-yarder, some play action shots that they were aiming for. So that's the kind of game that the Vikings want to play with defenses. They want to make them fear the run game. There just haven't been too many games where Aaron Jones has made them fear the run game. Yeah, that's a good point. See how it all translates. They're back home for 3 in a row. Probably nice for them, for everybody. They've been on the road for a long time. Yeah. It's 9-2. I mean, man, they're right there. The Lions are 10-1. The Packers are 8-3. This division is giving them no favors, but they're still in that conversation to win the division. And if you're in the conversation to win the division this year, you're in the conversation to be that 1 seed. It's just going to be really interesting to see where these next 6 games take them. Yeah, we get into the minutia of it, but it's just so crazy that they're 9-2. Like that's wild. Like nobody on earth predicted that. No. It's crazy, and it's good on all of them too. So it shows the work that Kevin O'Connell can do. 100%. Thanks, Andrew. We'll talk to you next week. Sounds good, Mike. Thanks. Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA. Great stuff from Andrew. One thing I am struck by, one thing I was talking to Andrew about with the future schedule, is there are no easy games left. I know they've got the Bears at home still on their schedule. That should be a win, but I feel like the Bears are getting better, even if they're not seeing results. This is easily a team that could be 6-5 right now, not 4-7. They're, right there in a lot of these games, losing heartbreakers. And there's no easy quarterbacks on the schedule either. If you look at the rest of the way, you got Kyler Murray coming up next. Now, he had a rough game last week, but he's 4th in ESPN's total QBR right now. You got Kirk Cousins after that. Whatever we want to say about Kirk Cousins, he's not an easy quarterback to play against. He will get the ball out. He's the kind of guy who could do damage against them, especially if they don't have their pass rush cooked up against Kirk Cousins. Then you got Caleb Williams again, but Williams is ascending. I thought he played really well on Sunday. You've still got Geno Smith, who, again, not a great quarterback, but a good quarterback. Certainly better than the likes of Joe Flacco, Mac Jones, Will Levis, some of the guys they were playing earlier this season during this more recent winning streak. And then, of course, you've got Jordan Love and Jared Goff still on the schedule. Like, not
not really the elite of the elite quarterbacks, but good quarterbacks, guys who have been there, have done that. So that will stress and test this defense probably more than it has been tested lately. And that will be a interesting thing to see if they can respond, how their secondary in particular holds up. It's time for Vikings poetry on Daily Delivery. A game Sunday, I don't know if it deserves 1 or 1,000,000 poems, somewhere in between there, man. That was a lot to take in.
You know, I'm at the tail end of cold Michael Rand of the Star Tribune.
Yeah.
And which made it that much tougher to watch the game yesterday. But I power through because my soul needs to speak about it.
How many haikus do you have today?
I have 3 of them.
3 of them. Okay. I'd like to hear
Thanks
the first one.
for asking during the segment.
I'd like to, well, it's always 3 or 4. How would you like to start the first one?
How about I just read it?
Sure. It's usually what you do.
Okay. Live by the adage. Be careful what you wish for. No more excitement.
I would have gone for a nice, tidy 27-16 would have been fine. Even 27-24 with a simple onside kick recovery would have been more or less, par for the course. It would have been like, yeah, okay, they made it close at the end, but didn't need all that, did you? Didn't need all that.
Oh, excuse me. Well, look, man, I have lately, last couple weeks, last couple months, as I've settled into a new city, I've been thinking to myself, man, I'm kind of in a rut. I'm kind of in a routine. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to interject a little more excitement in my life and see a little bit more of the world, or do more stuff, or meet more people. And I just need more excitement, right? Mm-hmm. All this just going to work and then taking my son to this or that sport, right? I need more excitement. I need something new and different in my life. And I watched that game and it's like, no, I don't need that level of excitement. No. I don't need that kind of constant worry and fret and threat of something happening in my life. If I can't handle it in a long football game, right? What was it? That was a long football game.
It was a very long game. Yeah. My kids were like, I was going to take them somewhere afterwards. We did get somewhere, but they just kept me like, when is this game going to be over? And I'm like, well, funny you should mention it. It just surprisingly went to overtime, so it's going to take a lot longer. I'm very sorry. We can't go yet.
I'm sure they were understanding.
Oh, yeah.
But if I can't handle it for a 3+ hour football game, I don't need it in the rest of my life. And like, you think about everything that had to happen to get that game to overtime, right?
Oh, yeah.
They had the 11-point lead. All they had to do was not give up a touchdown. Okay. And then, all you have to do is not give up a 2-point conversion.
Yes. Right.
Okay. All right. Now, all you have to do is recover an onside kick, about which the announcers made a big deal that there has not been a converted onside kick all season long, even though people keep trying it against the Vikings, apparently.
Yep. Only team. Yeah.
You only have to recover that, and then all you have to do is prevent them from getting a field goal, right?
Yep.
All of that could have made life a whole heck of a lot simpler. Yes. And I just don't need it. I don't need it in my life.
I hope this doesn't step on one of your next poems, because it reminded me of and sent me tumbling into the archives for, you and I went to a similar game at Soldier Field almost exactly 25 years ago, as it turns out. November 14th, 1999. Wasn't quite as ridiculous in terms of giving up the lead, but the Bears scored a late touchdown to tie the game, 24-24. Vikings get the ball back, drive down immediately. Moss catches a pass at like the 5. They get it down to the 3, call their timeouts. Gary Anderson trots out for a 20-yard chip shot and misses it. A 20-yarder. That's an old school extra point. It is almost the shortest possible kick. Misses it. He and Mitch Berger are arguing about who screwed up. Like, they didn't like the hold, I guess. Maybe the laces were out. I don't know what the problem was. So they get to overtime. Jeff George gets intercepted almost immediately. Looks like the Bears are going to win this stupid game that the Vikings had in the bag. But lo and behold, Chris Boniol misses a kick, and the Vikings drive down. Somehow Gary Anderson makes a 35-yarder into the stiffest wind I've ever seen. It barely crosses the crossbar. Like Gary Anderson did, for all of his accuracy, did not have the strongest leg. It barely went over, but they won that game 27-24 in overtime. It was almost as ridiculous as this one.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think you're forgetting the most important aspect of that game, which is that it was the first home game after Walter Payton passed away.
And everybody was saying it was Walter Payton's, like, I don't know, the gust of wind. I don't know what it was. Something about the spirit of Walter Payton kept him from making that field goal.
Right. And so everybody, not us, obviously, but everybody else, the Bears fans, as soon as that field goal was missed, started chanting, Walter, Walter, Walter. And that was before the renovation, when the place was truly a dump.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was. We went with a bunch of people. I think the Telejohns were there, maybe, and we ended up, like, we're driving back into, like, Wisconsin. We get, like, halfway, we stay the night. I remember we got, like, a big pile of barbecue food, and I slept for like 13 hours. I've never slept that well in my life after being out in the wind and the cold and just the emotional turmoil and toll that those games take.
Well, I think it took as much out of us as it did the players. I think we can say that so. Definitively.
Yeah. Imagine how I felt is how I like to think about it. Imagine, as tired as they were, imagine how I felt. All right, number 2, please.
I am begging you, the Bears organization, make the wrong hire.
You're worried about Caleb Williams being pretty good. That sounds like
I am so worried about that.
Because he was pretty good. He looks like he's got some juice to him. He can make some plays.
So I haven't watched any Caleb Williams up until this game, right? I haven't seen anything. I have just heard he's had an up and down type of season, and what you might expect from a rookie quarterback, right?
Yeah.
But what we saw on Sunday is the makings of something here, but it also looks like somebody who needs the proper and appropriate guidance and coaching and system to appropriately work through, right? Yeah. And so you can imagine what he might look like if Kevin O'Connell got his hands on him.
So I was just thinking about that. Yeah, like if he was being coached by KOC, like, wow.
Right. And so we've seen KOC have lots of success with different quarterbacks and seems to build something around, right? So it is imperative, because we know they're going to fire their coach. We know he's not making it through after this season, right? So it is absolutely imperative for anybody who is a Vikings fan to need the Chicago Bears to really screw this one up, right? Because if they get the right coach, they get somebody that they can trust and that can build this player into what he can be, because he's not going to just blow you away right away. He looks like he's still the clay that needs to be molded. But if they get it, oh my goodness, it is going to be awful for a very long time.
Yeah, he's good. He's got talent. You would worry too, like, was talking with the Access Vikings guys. I think this was for a podcast last week about how all the success the Vikings are having with Darnold and, doing this with Cousins before that, and even a little bit of the Dobbs magic last year, although that was short-lived. But, doing this with Darnold and kind of showing how they can kind of build a productive season out of a quarterback, and, assuming they're going to do the same with McCarthy, is going to make some of the people under O'Connell coveted for, if not head coaching jobs, at least coordinator jobs. And you could see a guy like Josh McCown, who is the quarterback coach here, the offensive guy here under O'Connell, has some Chicago ties, played in Chicago. You would worry about him getting tapped for a role there, because I think he's a big part of this success too. So I'm a little bit worried about their staff getting raided both offensively and defensively after this season.
Yeah, well, we'll worry about that later.
We always have right now, and they're 9-2. But yeah, your fears of the Bears finally hiring the right guy are justified, but they also are still the Bears, so you never know, they might screw it up again.
That is our biggest hope right now.
Yeah, we can only hope for that. Number 3, please.
I've never doubted the Minnesota Vikings in the kicking game.
No, you've never doubted them in the kicking game.
I can't think of one time in my life where I have ever doubted or thought that anything bad could happen with the Minnesota Vikings in the kicking game. Name me one time. Name me one time when the kicking game has failed this team. I defy you.
I can't name one time. I can name a lot of times. That's what I could do. Hey, listen, their kicking history is so bad that I wasn't like yelling at the TV, but I'm like talking to the TV by myself, like, hey, like, maybe you want to run the clock down a little bit more just in case Romo misses this 29-yarder. Like, they could have brought it down to like a minute just in case he misses it. Then the Bears can't come down and maybe score again, and it ends in a tie at least. Like, that's where my head is when a Vikings kicker lines up for a chip shot field goal.
Well, I'm not going to claim that thought didn't cross my mind. I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you that I didn't somewhat think perhaps something along the same lines. But, it's been surprisingly good this year. And for some reason, I did have some confidence yesterday. And the other part about it is like, if he had missed that kick, considering what they allowed to have happen in the last number of minutes at the end of the fourth quarter, they probably would have deserved to lose at that time, right? And so, at that point, you just have to accept fate. If you're going to give up the touchdown and the 2-point conversion and the onside kick and the field goal, at a certain point, you had plenty of opportunities to stop the madness long before whatever happened in overtime.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I had zero confidence, and was well-founded, that they were going to win the coin toss. As soon as they called tails, I was like, well, obviously it's heads. And then of course it was. And you're just like, well, here comes the quick and painless touchdown. Let's just get it out of the way. But, give them credit. They have been a very resilient team. Kevin O'Connell he's not all sunshine and rainbows, but he will make his players believe that they can win no matter what, and he whatever it was, they turned it around again yesterday.
Well, it's possible that he's a better coach than some of the ones that they've had in this franchise history.
Maybe he's a better coach than you are a fan. Think about that.
No. Don't you dare end this segment this way. I am playing through pain today. I'm playing through a cold today to bare my soul. Don't you dare take it out on me on this segment, sir.
By the way, John Marthaler's team lost 6-2, so I don't know if we're going to be hearing from him for a while.
That's fine.
Just more excellent Vikings poetry. And Keith's thought about how he would like there to be less excitement in these games reminds me, I think they flashed a graphic during the Bears-Vikings game on Sunday that said something like, since the start of the 2022 season, the Vikings have had like 21 or 22 one-score wins, while the Bears have had like 5, something like that. It was just something like that. Just reminds you of how many close, tense, tight games this team has played. And there's, earlier in the year, they weren't doing this to us. They were playing more comfortable football. And again, this Bears game was trending that way until things went haywire for the last 2 minutes. Even though it wasn't fully on lockdown, you felt like when it was 24-10 and it was 27-16 that it was kind of settled, that it was right there for them to just kind of close it out, even though they didn't. But there've been plenty of games like that this year where it got a little dicey. This was the first one that got really, really dicey that I can remember for a while. But still, they did find a way to prevail, and that has been a key marker of this team this season. Quickly into the cooler, Gopher men's basketball team gets a narrow win over Central Michigan last night. They've been winning games. I think they're 5-1 now, but the way they're playing in the non-conference season against some of these kind of low to mid majors does not inspire a ton of confidence. They're going to have to play better, certainly once Big Ten play starts here in a little while. Wild loses to Winnipeg. Winnipeg's really good. The Wild have been very good this year too, but Winnipeg is very good. That game at XL Energy Center. Kind of a prove-it game, kind of a measuring stick kind of game. The Wild didn't win this time. They threw a bunch of shots at Winnipeg early on. And when a lot of those don't go, you start to wonder if the tide is going to turn, and it did. Just one of 82, but you would want to beat Winnipeg at some point because that's a team in your division that will be right there at the end of the year with you as well. Wolves play tonight against the Rockets. They're favored, even though Houston has a much better record. This game at Target Center, bunch of home games in a row. This is important. You don't want to kind of keep this track they're on. They're 8-8 right now, very uneven. They've lost some games against inferior opponents that they should have won. They've already played a bunch of teams that that suggest a more forgiving schedule. Things are going to get harder here soon. Houston's off to a very nice start, so a chance to get right against a team that's good, but that again people think they should beat. So an important one for the Wolves tonight to get on the right side of 500. That will do it for me today. Randy Johnson on Gopher Football tomorrow, as well as Chip Scoggins on Football Across Minnesota tomorrow. And then planning a couple of standalone one-interview episodes over the holiday break. I think it'll be Chip Scoggins again on Thursday, talking about an excellent story he's got coming out on Thanksgiving. And then I believe Ben Gessling on Friday to talk Vikings, setting up Vikings versus Falcons, some special topics, things of that nature. Go subscribe to Ben's newsletter, by the way, the Access Vikings newsletter. That comes out every Friday. Excellent stuff there. I'm sure this week will be no exception, and we'll talk about his subject, I'm sure, for Friday's show as well. Until then, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow.